There are a lot of options out there for version control. How can we decide which one to use? To an extent, it depends on personal preference. Much like what operating system or text editor you use, the ultimate decision is yours. You'll want to examine the options and decide where your preferences lie. In the interest of helping you learn about version control, though, we're going to make our own recommendation, Git. Git is a version control system invented by Linus Torvalds. If the name sounds familiar to you, it's because Linus is also the father of the Linux operating system. Linus still maintains the Linux kernel, which is the software at the heart of every Linux system. Remember in the last video when I mentioned really complicated projects? The Linux kernel has over 15 million lines of code, and about 3,500 new lines of code are added every day. Every time a new version of the Linux kernel is released, approximately 1,000 developers were involved. As impressive as those stats are, I'm sure you're wondering what they have to do with Git. Well, Linus originally developed Git in order to help him manage all of the work of maintaining the Linux kernel. Git is a large part of what makes that project work. It was designed from the start to make collaboration as quick and painless as possible. If it can help keep a project of that magnitude operating smoothly, imagine how easy it can make collaboration on your projects. There are a couple of things about the way Git is architected that make it a good choice as well. First, Git is what we call a distributed version control system. Some version control systems are centralized. There's only one repository, usually stored on a network server somewhere. When you want to work with that project, you do it over a network connection to that central repository. This has a few disadvantages. It's hard to do any work on your project without a network connection. If anything happens to that one repository, you might lose some or even all of your project history. And requiring everything to go through the central server can hinder collaboration. Distributed version control systems, like Git, are different in that there is no central repository. Everyone who works on the project has their own repository. This means that you can interact with the repository even if you don't have a network connection. Most of your interactions with the repository are going to be really fast, and collaboration is easy. Just grab your own copy of the repository and get started. The second interesting aspect of Git's architecture has to do with how it was built. Linus originally had the idea that Git itself wasn't going to be a version control system, but would be a collection of tools and commands that someone could use to build a version control system. The way Linus put it, Git was going to be the plumbing of a good version control system, and people could build whatever porcelain they wanted on top of that. Git would serve as the internals and keep everything moving fast and easy through the system, and these other tools would serve as the user interface. Over time, Git gained some porcelain commands of its own and has evolved into a fully functional version control system, but you still have access to all of the plumbing. This is a really powerful idea. Because you have access to the internals, you can do a lot of really advanced and powerful things with Git. This kind of control makes Git a really robust way to manage your project. Short of being intentionally malicious, it can be really difficult to permanently damage your project history. Finally, we would be remiss not to mention GitHub. GitHub is easily the most popular site for sharing your code and managing software projects. In fact, we use GitHub pretty extensively at Treehouse. It's like a social network for your repositories. You can share your projects online, either publicly with the world or privately with your friends and collaborators, and other people can view your project history, add comments, or even submit their own commits to help make your project better. Learning Git will help you tap into this huge community of developers and software projects. Even outside of GitHub, Git has been steadily gaining popularity in the software development world, which is a reason to learn in and of itself. It's more and more likely that you'll need to know Git in order to contribute to a software project. All of that, we think, makes a compelling argument for Git. It's not the simplest version control system on the market, and it can seem a little daunting at first, but the numerous benefits make it worthwhile. The next step is to get started with Git, but we've covered a lot of ground in this section about Git specifically and version control in general. Let's make sure we're all on the same page before we dive in.